Jai Prabhuji, hello everybody. We are at the third class of the course or section that deals with the mind in our study about Prabhuji's book, Experimenting with the Truth. Today we are going to read an article that answers the question regarding the mind, referring to the aspect of transcending to the mind, which is according to the understanding of the one who asked the question, means to get rid of the mind. This is not what Prabhuji says, but this is the understanding of the person that asked this question. And then he asks, so then how can I function in the world without a mind, without thinking, without analyzing? And this will give us further opportunity to delve into the distinction between transcending the mind and getting rid of the mind. Prabhuji will clarify that these are not the same things, although this was the assumption of the person who asked this question. So what else we can see here is that many times when we ask questions, in our questions, we already include assumptions that we are certain of, and we don't question them. There is a lecture of Prabhuji that is called Question Your Answers. And I think many of our questions can give Prabhuji inspiration, or maybe gave Prabhuji inspiration for this name, because we come many times with questions and in them there are already definite, certain assumptions that Prabhuji many times will direct us to question them. Maybe we need to think more about our assumptions. Maybe our question originates from our misunderstanding, from our confusion. And the answer that we need is not the answer to the question that we ask, but clarification about our wrong perception from which we ask this question. So this is a very good example for such a question. We will soon read it. And it is also a good opportunity for us to continue the discussion that we already started, we already touched when we spoke in the introduction to the mind about the fact that while the mind is not an aspect that we want to function from 24 hours a day, we don't want to live in the mind. At the same time, we don't want to dismiss the mind altogether. And that when we meet individuals that are in our eyes, and according to scriptures, are established in a realm that is transcendental to the mental activity, we do not meet an idle mind or dysfunctional mind in their words and works, but just the opposite. Thanks to these bright minds, giant minds, we receive not only access to the essence, with which we cannot always do a lot if we don't manage to listen to it, if we don't manage to recognize to it, because we are established in the minds. Many times all that we can do is maybe close our eyes and pray for some truth, some grace that will fall on us, but not more than this. We don't manage to perceive, to recognize. But thanks to these giant minds again, that not only gave us this hand, but also provided to us abundance of food for our intellect, abundance of maps with a lot of explanations, intellectual explanations that explain to us the problem, that explains to us different paths, different ways, that shed light on their own path. And all this, we don't have only to meditate and maybe sense, but we can process with our intellect, even if we have the most cluttered mind and we are not recognizing anything beyond our mind. With this as mind we can associate, and this can help us tremendously because we can process it, we can analyze it, we can think about it, we can check it in ourselves. Again, we are not expected, as we said in previous classes, to receive it as ultimate. We want us to experience the truth directly. We don't want to receive it from other individuals as a fact. But these facts that came from them, or these words that came from them, help us a lot in our own process. Because with our intellect, with our mind, we can associate with them and with the maps again that they provided to us. So the point that we are making here, that will be made in this article by Prabhuji, is that the mind is not a problem altogether. We don't want to kill the mind, get rid of the mind. It's a gift from God that we want to use to the maximum. And the problem that Prabhuji points to, and other rishis or saints and masters, when they spoke about the problematic aspect of the mind, is not that it exists, but it's the use that we do with the mind. And this is what we will understand further thanks to Prabhuji's words in this article. So let's read the question again and see what we mentioned earlier, the wrong assumption of the person that asked the question, and then we will go into Prabhuji's answer. Dear Prabhuji, according to your teachings, the important thing is to get rid of the mind. Notice there is not even a question or a doubt. This is a statement that the person makes to Prabhuji about Prabhuji's own teachings. Now he asks his question without asking if he understood or not. But it seems to me that life would be very difficult without the mind. Now we have an objection to the statement that we ourselves made. We said, according to your teachings, we want to get rid of the mind. It is important to get rid of the mind. But I think that it very doesn't make sense, because how can I function in life, in the world, without a mind? I'm not sure how I'm supposed to function without a mind. It seems to me very difficult. Could you please clarify this? So obviously this question is coming from our mind. We already find problems in a state that we still don't have access to. But this is our nature as minds. We ask questions and complicate and argue and find a lot of difficulties and misunderstandings, of course, both from genuine exploration and interest, but also because we continue to live in the mind. But masters will always be able to easily disperse the illusion, easily put everything in place, because they speak from seeing. So they see so easily the confusion and where we made the mistake exactly. It can be a slight mistake. Instead of transcending the mind, we said we need to get rid of the mind. And again, Prabhuji will put everything back in place in this article. And I would like to make a small reminder regarding these classes in general, that we spoke about the fact that in these classes we are going to find three elements, three aspects. The foundation, the inspiration, the basis, the goal, in a way, is Prabhuji's words. We want to delve into them, to try to understand them, to try to associate with them to the best of our ability. This is our basis. This is what we attempt in these classes. The second aspect is knowledge that we sometimes will provide that can support our understanding of Prabhuji's points that he makes, the words that he brings to us. Many times Prabhuji will make reference to vast knowledge that he will not include all of it, of course, naturally, in every piece of information, in every work. And we will sometimes add some more facts and some more knowledge that can enrich our study of Prabhuji's word. And the third aspect is my specific study, analysis, exploration into Prabhuji's word, which naturally this is what consists much of these classes. So in a way, I welcome you to my own exploration into Prabhuji's words. And of course, based on also guidance that I received from him and inspiration and association for many years with Prabhuji and his teachings. But at the same time, naturally, and obviously, if we want to know what Prabhuji says exactly, as we see manifested in this question, we want to check Prabhuji's words. Prabhuji is very specific and very detailed and very clear. Every word is in place. So in our attempt to understand what Prabhuji says, the ultimate reference is Prabhuji's words in his books and lectures. I hope that this study can also enrich us with, maybe thanks to my familiarity, maybe thanks to my own process of doing this effort for many years, I can benefit the watchers in some way in their own investigation into Prabhuji's words. But again, to know what Prabhuji says, we want to go to his words, always. Residing solely in the mind makes us non-existent. We live on longings and memories as well as in hopes and dreams about some imaginary future. Instead of perceiving what is, we go along in life projecting the illusory on the real. By transcending the mind, we regain the freedom to exist in the reality of the present while coming into harmony with ourselves, with others, and the entire universe. So in this paragraph, Prabhuji in fact acknowledges the problematic aspect of residing in the mind. So when he answers this question, the person who asked the question wanted to know, how can I function in life without a mind? Because I understand from your teachings that the important thing is to get rid of the mind. You repeat the words in the question. Prabhuji says, indeed, the mind is problematic, but he does not confirm that we need to get rid of the mind. Differently, he specifies that the problem is not to have a mind, but to reside in the mind. And in this, he gives us a clue. Prabhuji says, in fact, the mind, residing in the mind more accurately, can be very problematic. Residing in the mind, it's so problematic that it makes us non-existent. We do not live. If we reside in the mind, we are not in touch with life. Prabhuji explains more the problem of residing in the mind. We do not come in touch with the situations as they are, with the simple reality. We don't speak about some mystical, transcendental reality. We speak about our co-worker, our child, our parent, with ourselves. We are not seeing what is in front of our eyes because instead of looking, of seeing, of sensing, of listening, we project. We have this record in our mind that is broadcasting all day long, and he explains to us what is happening, but we don't check really what is happening. We are more reliant on the information, more relying on the information that is projected through this record than on ourselves in this moment. We don't check. We can check. We are here. We can just see how does the person behaves today. We might meet our co-worker that today he comes with a beautiful mood, full of love, gentle, kind, but we don't see it because in our mind we remember all the times he was not so kind to us, and we are defensive, and we don't even see his good intentions because we have a record that is already complete, that is already determined. And in this record, we have a full explanation about this person. So we dismiss the reality. We have no touch with the reality, and we miss endless opportunities that life provides to us because we are not attentive to them. Because we, again, mostly attentive to the record, to our thinking process, to our mind. This, Prabhuji tells us, makes us non-existent. We are not here. We are thinking. This is why the mind is very problematic. And the only way, Prabhuji tells us in this same paragraph, to gain access, to regain access with the reality, is by transcending the mind. We need this separation. We need to be able to live not only in our head, but in reality, if you want to be in touch with life. Then what will happen, Prabhuji tells us? We will connect with ourselves, we will connect with others, every situation, and we will connect with the entire universe. This, we can say, small change in our approach, a little attention to what is happening, a little relaxation of this record will make us to connect not just with ourselves, to be in harmony, in connection, in dialogue, in listening, not only with others and with everything that is happening, but with the entire universe. Everything will fall into place. Everything will be in harmony. In other words, we can understand that all the problems, all the conflicts, all the separation, all the suffering is coming due to us living in our mental faculty. This is the originate of everything that is disharmonious. It's the thinking. It's in the thoughts that we separate, that we create the conflicts. In reality, everything is in harmony. This is what Prabhuji tells us in this paragraph. We are chained to the mind as if it were our master. Transcending the mind means using it rather than being its servants. The mind is useful as long as it does not control our lives. The finite mind should serve the infinite consciousness, not vice versa. Mental slavery leads to suffering and misery, but once we become the masters of our minds, our lives will be divine. My advice is not to get attached to the mind. True mastery is achieved through meditation. So Prabhuji further clarifies the distinction between getting rid of the mind and transcending the mind. He does tell us the mind is problematic, but what is problematic is the mind, is the fact that we reside in it. In this paragraph, he tells us we are chained by the mind, as if it is our master. And the change that needs to happen, or that is recommended by seers of truth, is not to stop using the mind, but to start using the mind. Currently, the mind is our Lord and Master. It's our God. It's our North and Star. We follow all the commands that are coming through this hectic aspect in us, thinking in us, that is in many cases a result of psychological patterns, fears, desires, specific situations that we ourselves went through and accordingly programmed our mind in a specific way that in many cases does not serve us so well. In many cases, it's not very positive, it's not very kind, it's not open, even as a mind we speak. We are letting it control us. We don't evaluate our own patterns. We don't bring light to the ways in which we act because we get them as commands from our mind. The change that needs to happen, Prabhuji tells us, is that we stop being a tool in the hands of our minds, but understanding that the mind is a tool in our hands. This is the change. We want to use the mind. As we said, we see individuals that are transcendental to the mind, using their minds in a beautiful way, in a useful way, in a beneficial way, in a kind way, in a contributing way. But they are not used by their minds because they are observing. So here Prabhuji, in addition to telling us that being in mental slavery, which means when we are tools in the hands of our minds, is equaling suffering, is the cause of suffering, as we already visited in this course. He also tells us that the way out of it, how do we go out? Okay, we understand, maybe we already agree. After listening to Prabhuji, to this word, we can recognize, indeed, we are constantly in our thoughts and we are not so relaxed, we are not so harmonious. And maybe we want to transcend the mind, as Prabhuji recommends to us. How can we transcend the mind? We feel that we are the mind, we have no opening. Prabhuji tells us meditation, observation. And we spoke about it in the previous class, I believe, that the recommendation of this yoga, of Prabhuji's message, will always be observation. And the explanation that Prabhuji gives regarding observation is that by observing, what happens is that we create separation. We can recognize ourselves as being different just by the fact that we maybe recognize that our mind is hectic. Maybe we recognize that our mind does not stop for a second. Already there is recognition. Already there is some observation. Already there is some distance. We already can sense and understand we are not the mind. There are two different entities, and this is the first step. In Prabhuji's, we mentioned his guidance for meditation, that he recommends to us first to observe the body, and then we create the separation. We feel all the day that we are the body. In this meditation, in this observation, we can recognize ourselves as different than the body. We can observe our thoughts, we can observe our feelings, and ultimately Prabhuji will say, observe everything that can be observed. And through this observation, through the meditation, we can recognize ourselves as different than all the experiences in our life, different than all the phenomena in our life. And now Prabhuji will quote two quotes from the Dhammapada that support this statement that he made, that in order to transcend the mind, in order to detach from the mental suffering, the path is observation and meditation. Let's read these quotes. The mind is difficult to subjugate. It is extremely subtle and tends to run after its fantasies. The sage should watch it attentively. A controlled mind leads to real happiness. The mind by nature is scattered, wandering, and incorporeal. It lives as if hidden in a cave. Those who succeed in overcoming it are liberated from the powerful fetters of illusion. Dhammapada 3, 4, 5. So, as we said here, we can see that also the Buddha tells us in the Dhammapada that through meditation, through observation, we can detach ourselves from the fetters of the mind, and that what we want, in the Buddha's words, is a controlled mind, is a mind, in other words, that is not controlling us, that it's not our master. We mentioned that Prabhuji usually does not use words such as to control the mind, or that we want a controlled mind. This is usually not the terminology that we will find in Prabhuji, but this is a quote from the Dhammapada, and we can assume that ultimately both the Buddha himself and Prabhuji are referring to the same essence, to the same reality, and they maybe use different words, and also maybe we translated them with different words and not the exact word that they use, and this is why we always recommend to go to the source of the words that are spoken by an individual that we want to associate with his mind. To overcome the mind does not mean to stop using it, but just not to leave it turned on 24 hours a day. Although it is essential to function in the world, it will function more efficiently if we give it some rest. We should use it only when necessary, and when not, to forget about it and just be. To get rid of the mind is to free ourselves from its dominance and not allow it to control us. We can live with the mind, but without identifying with it. Dominated by the mind, we will live in hell, but mastering it, we shall discover ourselves as infinite consciousness. So Prabhuji further clarifies this distinction and the understanding of what transcending the mind means, which again is not to get rid of the mind, but we want to get rid of the dominance of the mind. We want to get rid of the control of the mind, of being in the mind 24 hours. Prabhuji tells us here, we don't let it rest, and we don't let ourselves rest from the mind. And that the mind will not be harmed if we let it some rest. Maybe it will get a lot of benefit. Maybe we will have a much better mind with more clarity. So we need to also be able to relax this control of the mind and recognize ourselves as different than it. Recognize that we also have life outside this mind, that we can also interact with people not only through our thinking. we can also recognize ourselves not only according to our thoughts about ourselves. We can recognize the world and everything else and many topics maybe that we're interested in, not only through the mind. We are not just mind. And Prabhuji says, through this detachment, once we relax this mental dominance, only then we can recognize ourselves as pure consciousness. Obviously, the person that asked this question is a spiritual aspirant, is asking how to walk this path. And he's concerned that if he will get rid of the mind, he might be very spiritual. Maybe I will be enlightened, but I will not be able to function in the world, right? This is his question. Prabhuji tells him not only you will be able to function in the world, you will be able for sure to function in the world, because when we are in touch with life, with reality, when we understand ourselves better, which this is what transcending the mind will allow us, we will be able to see more. When we interact more attentively with others, we can definitely manage in life in a much better way. We have more awareness. Not only we will function better in the world, but only then we will be able to recognize the pure consciousness, which this is what we want as aspirants of truth. I use the mind to answer your question, just like I use my feet to walk or my hands to write. But having finished, I rest in the silence of pure consciousness. And in these beautiful words, Prabhuji closes this article. And I personally find this short ending very impactful, very inspiring, and very representative of Prabhuji in all his books and lectures. And in general, I think that this is the feeling that we get from Prabhuji's contents. What Prabhuji does here is that first he gives a very simple, relatable, illustrative example. The mind, we said, we don't so easily recognize. We saw also in the Dhammapada quotes, it is subtle. It is as if hidden in a cave. We speak about this phenomenon, but we try to explore and understand what is really the mind. We quoted a few, brought a few different explanations regarding what is this mind. For sure, we don't see our mind clearly. If we saw our mind, we would be in pure consciousness. We try to understand what is this mind? Where does it start? Where does it end? What does it mean? What is me? Where do I start and end regardless of the mind? We don't see it so easily. But we try to bring more and more light and understand what is the mind. But the feet, we understand what is feet. Hands, we understand what is hands. And here Prabhuji gives us an example that makes everything that is said in this article so much more clear. It is such a friendly example. He says, in the same way that I use my hands to write and my feet to walk, I use my mind. And once I remember there was a class that we had with Prabhuji, a lecture in Avenue B in Manhattan, when Prabhuji gave a similar example. And he did with his legs the movement. And he says, I walk in order to get from one destination to another. When I arrive to the destination, my legs, I cannot show my legs, they don't continue this action. I understand, I arrived. They rest, I forget about my legs. I don't think about them anymore. In the same way, Prabhuji tells us, I write with my hands because I need to use them. They are a tool. But once I finished, they are resting. The same thing, Prabhuji tells us, happens with the mind. I use my mind because I need in order to communicate in a language. But when I finished, I go back to resting in pure consciousness. So in addition to being a very friendly and relatable example that is speaking in our language, this we can understand easily. I feel that Prabhuji, the other aspect of the beauty in this example, in my eyes, is that he takes us from our realm. He talks in our language. And from this realm of communication, he takes us like in hand into his experience, into his word, into his intimate word. And he gives us access to his word. He says, I use my hands, in order to write. I use my feet in order to walk. I use my mind in order to explain to you everything that I have said. But when I finish, I go back to rest in pure consciousness. And in this he leaves us. In this he closes this article. With this understanding, intellectual understanding, together with the taste of the realm from which he speaks. Thank you very much for joining. Jai Prabhuji.